I'm going to go for broke on this one. I left Japan in 1971 for good. Excuse me. And the plan was, some friends of mine that my good old friends from New York had been traveling, and I had been traveling. I had stayed in Japan for a couple of years. They had stayed around Afghanistan for a couple of years. And we said, let's meet together. I was finished with this country for a while. And they said, let's meet in Bali, because they had a friend who had a house in Bali, who said, use it. And they said, well, you can meet us there, and we can all stay in this white coral, bamboo thatched house on Bali. I said, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, my friend David Bailey, their friend David Bailey, built this house with money he made from smuggling. I never asked them what exactly he had smuggled, but from Afghanistan I can sort of guess. But anyway, and the aerogram, pre-email, pre-all, like instant messaging, the aerogram, how many people here know what an aerogram even is? Yeah. Okay, you can still get them. I've got some in India. You can get them. It's one sheet of paper that you write on, and then you fold the paper itself, and it becomes an envelope. It's the cheapest mail you can send, and that's what we used to communicate with. So I get the aerogram from them, and here's the directions. This is our itinerary. Bali, David Bailey's house, near Kuta Beach, October. That's it. But that was enough, right? That was really enough to go. So I went to Bali. In fact, I found a freighter to go from Japan to Bali, by the way. And I get there. It's 1971, so there's a couple of things I have to straighten out. Kuta Beach in 1971. How many people have been on Kuta Beach here? Okay. Does anyone know that there are like Kentucky Fried Chicken, Starbucks, and all these things? Okay. At that time, it was a dirt road. Literally, and there was zero, and that's literally true, no electricity on the street. That's the Bali, that's the Kuta Beach I got to, and walking down the main road, there were 2 or 3 kiosks, and on the side of the road, cows grazing under coconut palms, and it was beautiful. And I got there, and I had to find David Bailey's house. And someone said, go talk to Mike. Mike was a fixture. He was the resident gaijin foreigner on Kuta Beach, and he knew everybody and knew everything. He'd been there for several years. And I went to his house, which was the last house before the beach, and I said, David Bailey's house? He said, yeah. He said, it's down the beach about 2 kilometers, but you'll see it. Mike and I later became very good friends. I went down the beach, and I got to the house. I saw it right away. On the left is the ocean, so that's a giveaway. On the right there was this house, and I walked up, and the only person there was Knuk, K-N-U-K, Knuk, the houseboy, who was hired by David Bailey to kind of keep the air moving in the house when he wasn't there. No one else with David Bailey was not there, and not expected, and my friends weren't there, but this is not the age of, again, instant messaging. But Knuk seemed to be used to people showing up like that, so he showed me into the house. And I went in, I unpacked my luggage, which was a rucksack about this big, and that's what I did. For 2 or 3 days, I was going to Kuta, Denpasar, Summerlin Beach, and doing things. And one evening, coming back, walking along the beach, I felt ill. I didn't feel very good at all. And I was happy to get home, and when I got there, I just sat in a chair. And long story short, that's where I stayed, in that house for the next 10 days, burning up with the worst fever I ever had in my life. Knuk was there in the day and left in the evening. Looking back on it, I kind of unraveled this because I never went to a doctor or a hospital. I just went through with the fever, and I said it was about 10 days. It was probably dengue fever. I'm not sure. The only medicine I took was the medicine that one day I was so desperate and in high fever, I looked in my dictionary and I said, Knuk, obat, medicine. And he went in the garden and he picked a couple of papaya leaves and he brewed them into a horrible brown concoction, which I drank. It was the worst thing I ever drank in my life, hoping that it was as good for me as it was bad tasting. Drank the stuff down, and whether it had any effect or not, I'm not sure. The fever went on. I'm going to try to get this really short. I'm sorry. Because the daytimes I spent moving from chair to bed, to toilet to kitchen to bed, just moved around, trying to hopefully find some position that I would feel better in. But the fever stayed high and it stayed long. And what happens is fever, if it's going up and down, it's one thing. But this is a fever that just stayed there. And what happened is the only difference was my resistance and my resolve, and it just sort of like the word resistance. I weakened as the time went on, and more affected me. Those were the daytimes. The nighttime was long. I was scared. I was 21, 22 years old. I was scared. I thought, this is it. I'm finished here. And I would lay in bed, and at night, Canuck was gone. I was alone in his house, and I would put my kerosene lamp on the sideboard with out of reach so I wouldn't knock it over, with a very small flame that, so in order to just cast a tiny light in the room and not flicker, and also be small enough so that the kerosene would last the whole night and I wouldn't have to get up. I was afraid. I was scared about myself. So things happened in the night, and I noticed one thing after several days of fever, that these borderlines called the body started to fade. And I was connected outside. I'm not talking about astral projection or astral travel. I noticed it one night when a mouse, I think it was, I don't know, I didn't see it, was in the kitchen sort of scrambling around. There was a little, and that sound, simultaneous with the sound, this little thread that was hooking us up together, gave a little tug. And then the palm leaf on a bush outside that was caught by the wind, the rigid 5-finger palm leaves, and the wind caught it, and it went, and that also gave me a tug. And I started to sense this incredible connection with everything, a million cilia coming from my body that were connected to every flea on every bird and every coconut and every tree. And it was an amazing experience, I thought. And I thought, yeah, this is getting close to death. Then one night, I'm there, and I open my eyes partially, and at the foot of my bed there's a shadow. And within the shadow is a figure, and the figure is looking at me like this, just there, and it's waiting, and it's very calm, it's not rushing, and I said, death has come. Death is in the catbird seat. He knows he's going to win in the end, so there was no need for speeding up or hurrying or anything, he just waited, just in this posture, looking at me like that. Now, I hope I can get this right. I think fear of death is a pretty heebie-jeebie. I think fear of death, there's a couple of things we're talking about here. One is, there's a fear of how we're going to die. I mean, am I going to be crushed by a truck or, an illness or whatever? But once that's out of the way, there's a whole other generation of things that happen with that fear. Now, in this case, there was death at the foot of my bed. And that was out of the question. Now, I knew the answer to that question. So I could deal with other parts of death, And I thought, now, okay, this is it. This death has come for me. I'm dead now, and I know how I'm going to die. And I started to think of the second generation fears, or ideas, and I thought, now, what's going to happen now? My mother is going to get a telegram from the State Department, and it's going to say, your son Charles died of dengue fever in the tropics. He was alone in the house of a drug smuggler. Now this is going to be, for my mother, this is going to be like the Thanksgiving of guilt, right? We're going to have Thanksgiving with guilt soup and guilt turkey and guilt stuffing, and she's going to go on this whole thing, oh my God, where did I go? But in fact, I thought, it's not really that bad. I mean, knowing now, if you accept death, he said, going this way, I thought, I could die in an emergency room in Secaucus, New Jersey, with 12 well-meaning interns jamming tubes down my throat, trying to save me. And here I am. I thought, if I had the choice, I said, yeah, I'll go for the Bali death, thank you. So anyway, that was that part of it. Let's see. So what I did at that point, I was still quite scared. I did what every child does when they're in a scary position, and that is, they cover themselves. I went under the sheets, and I covered myself. I should tell you that I never really looked directly at this figure. It was too frightening, but I sensed everything that it was about. Does anyone not know what I mean by not looking at something but sensing it? Thank you very much. And so I went to sleep, and the next thing I heard was a little knock on the door, and I woke up. It was very early morning, still dark, still pitch black out, and I walked to the door, and I opened the door, and there were two men on the porch, and one said, I'm David Bailey. And so this is the guy's house, right? So I knew who it was, and I might have said, welcome home or something, but I didn't. I was too knocked out to do that. And I turned around and went back to the room. I just sort of left the door open and went back to the room. And I tried to sleep, and a few minutes later, his partner, the other guy that was there, an Indonesian fellow, his partner, I'm going to explain partner. In Indonesia, you cannot own land as a non-national, so his partner was the man who was the Indonesian counterpart that allowed him to own land. His partner came in and said, David Bailey wants you to leave. And so I was completely spent, I was washed out, there was nothing, I just very quietly packed up my little rucksack, and I think they had kept the tuk-tuk or the bimo, I think it's in Indonesia, it's bimo, little taxi cab, I think they had kept them when they came and waiting on the road, and I went out and got in that bimo and I was driven back to Kuta Beach. I arrived at Kuta Beach, it'd still be pre-dawn, very dark out, and I don't know where to go, so I decided to go to Mike's house. Mike is the only person I know in Kuta, and his house was the first house, the house closest to the beach. I went there and knocked on the door, and Mike was not home, but his partner, Pranoto, was there, an Indonesian Balinese fellow, fantastic man with black curly hair and buggy eyes, and he was one of those Indonesians, he was a dancer, I think he's got it right here, and he was this fantastic dancer. He was a magician, he was a dancer, he was an artist, a flautist, a painter, did I say? Right, he was a leprechaun, he was a shaman, he was just the most magnificent person. He was meeting Pranoto on the street was like running into a lucky charm. This was a long time ago, excuse me. A lot of stuff changing up here. Okay. So Pranoto, fortunately in Asia, we know that we don't have to, if it was in the West, perhaps someone would say, what happened? What is it? And Pranoto looked and took one, he sussed it out, and we sat down. And Pranoto just sat down, we sat down on the porch, and Pranoto struck a match to light the kerosene lamp. And at that instant, this light filled me. It was totally filled me up. And I was in perfect peace. It's common after a near-death experience that people feel some euphoria. It's not uncommon. And I did. I felt I was blissed out. I could probably analyze it later, and let's not go there, but that's how I felt. And I sat there and just was there, and Pranoto was there, and we were just quietly having tea. And I realized I had to kind of sort out through this thing and find out how much of what I just experienced in this last 10 days was real, how much was illusion, how much was fever, how much was... Because Bali, as some of you might know, is a place that when you go there, you are at least capable of suspending your disbelief in the supernatural, at the very least. Seeing barong dances, Chris dances, trance dances. So I sat there, and as the sun rose, it filled the porch with light, and Pranoto, who I said was an artist, had painted the entire porch with murals. The back wall, the main wall to the house was full, and then the half walls around the outside, and the pillars were all full of his paintings, and there was Barong, the lion, good lion with the long tongue and buggy eyes, and there were gamelan players, and people with Chris knives. Do you know the Chris knife, the wavy, which mythology tells us were made on the mountains by the old women who would pick up the molten steel and iron by hand and shape them by hand. True or not, you can decide. I looked around, and there were flowers, and there were trees, and there were butterflies, and there were gamelan players, and it was a wonderful mural all around the room. And coming down this way was a stream. And in the stream, there were women who were bathing and washing their clothes and hanging out. And I loved the way he portrayed the women with their head on the side, and their hair was just a straight black line to the water as it was wet, with a flower on the other side. It was magnificent. And I looked around, and I followed the stream down, and there in the corner was a black smudge, and in the smudge was a figure perched like this. And I said, Pranoto, what is that? And he said, that's the ghost that lives in David Bailey's house.
Wow.